Hi guys, I know it's been a while since I've talked to you at all, and I've been flooding you with crash course videos because I was going through, not wanting to introduce any kind of new material while we were in the early stages of the lockdown. But I think now that we're in the remote learning phase, it's time for us to go ahead and move on. Just a couple of things. On this video, I'm going to take you through just the first 10 amendments. It'll be pretty quick. If you don't know already, with the governor's proclamation, the Constitution test is no longer a requirement for government classes because of the the circumstances of the quarantine, the lockdown, whatever it is you want to call it. So basically, what I'm going to do here is talk my way through the first 10 amendments, and then I'll have some type of just a quick assignment for you guys to cover. Just because the Constitution test isn't part of our requirements anymore, having a passing grade for the class is still a graduation requirement, though. So just bear that in mind. Um, Understand though that I'm not going to go too hard and heavy and beat you guys over the head with the material in the class. We're just going to try and get through this the best we can. So I know this is going to be a little bit of review in the first amendments, but first few amendments, but let's go ahead and look at what we got. So a reminder, so we've had the preamble, the 7 articles. Now let's go ahead and go back to the 27 amendments. We know the Bill of Rights was brought about because the Anti-Federalist movement was upset with not having a Bill of Rights attached to the original Constitution. So the Bill of Rights was added to appease the Anti-Federalists, so that way New York would approve the Constitution and give it a great deal more legitimacy. The first 10 amendments, we know, are the Bill of Rights. Critics felt the Constitution was not clear enough in protecting their individual rights and liberties. Pretty much summed that up already. There were originally 12 amendments that were opposed by James Madison. 10 were adopted, and so Madison is known as the father of the Constitution and the father of the Bill of Rights. Okay, so let's start with the First Amendment. If you remember, we did the little reminder thing in class with the hand. There's 5 parts of the First Amendment: speech, press, assembly, petition, and also the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. Speech, of course, was, the government can't limit our speech and limit our criticism of the government. Private entities are allowed to do so. We use that example with, the NFL could punish football players for kneeling if they wish to, but the government can't stop us from criticizing it. There are some limitations. We talked about slander, we talked about libel, slander being a spoken falsehood to discredit someone or to cause them some type of financial or personal harm. Libel is when that action is written in words. Freedom of the press, we talked about how the press is sometimes considered the 4th branch of government, and transparency is necessary, which the press provides us to make sure that the government is abiding by the will of the people. We talked about the Pentagon Papers and how the Pentagon Papers in the 1970s were leaked by several different major newspapers across the country, and the Nixon administration didn't want them published because of national security, but the papers were able to punish it until a court injunction came in to stop them. But they continued to publish it in different papers around the country, one at a time. Right now, freedom of assembly kind of seems like, we don't get to assemble much, and some questions have been called into whether or not the government has the right to do so when we're in this current situation right now. But because it's deemed for the public good, laws can be created or declarations can be created to limit how we assemble, so that way people can be kept safe. A petition is your ability to ask the government to listen to your concerns or your complaints, to redress your petition. So you can do that through several ways. The popular way is with a clipboard and signatures, but there's a more formal process that you actually have to follow. Finally, for the First Amendment, we have the Establishment Clause that states that Congress will not establish any national religion. And then the free exercise clause states that the Congress will not provide any kind of impediment or prohibition to the free exercise of religion or to not exercise religion. And that's been kind of coming up with churches closing down with the current situation we're in too. Boy, I wish we were in class to talk about it, but here we are, we can't. So, but the government can tell groups of people not to gather, and churches, as long as they're not singled out individually, uh, can be required to follow through with these government mandates as well. So that'll take us as a quick review of the First Amendment. Um, we talked about that already. Second Amendment, we've addressed the right to bear arms. This is the Second Amendment. It's an entirety here. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And while there's been much debate as to what the interpretation comes down to, should it be just for militias or is it for private ownership? Well, that's for the Supreme Court to continue to provide their own interpretations of the Constitution. One way we said that you could remember this amendment was that you have the right to bear arms and you have to arms. It's not the right to arm bearers. That would be more of a Russian thing. The Third Amendment is about keeping troops in private homes or the quartering of troops. We cannot be forced to take in troops into our homes unless Congress passes a law where we will be compensated for housing troops and feeding troops if we were in some type of national emergency. It's odd for me to say that when here we are in a national emergency. The reason why we have the Third Amendment to the Constitution is because, well, the British at one time did quarter troops in the homes of private citizens as a way to keep track of the way private citizens were interacting and talking, but also they didn't really have the barracks necessary to take care of the troops prior to the American Revolution breaking out. All right. The clue there was 3/4, and we all agreed that was a terrible clue. Okay, so the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment deals largely with your privacy. This is about, for the most part, searches and seizures. And so when we talk about the Fourth Amendment, we're looking at something that involves your own personal rights. The Fourth through Eighth Amendments basically are necessary for people that have been accused of a crime. The Seventh Amendment's an exception to that, but we'll get to that later. We basically look at the Fourth Amendment as how we are secure in our own privacy. And so we know that the Fourth Amendment, the American legal system is based on the tenet that we are innocent until proven guilty. And we're one of the few countries in the world that has that as a central philosophy. So the Fourth Amendment protects our rights to privacy. So the basic rule laid down by the Fourth Amendment is this: police officers have no general right to search for or seize evidence or seize or arrest people. Um, there has to be exceptions, and so except in particular circumstances, the police must have a proper warrant, which is a court order obtained with probable cause, which is basically reasonable grounds, and this guarantee is reinforced by something called the exclusionary rule. And this was developed by the Supreme Court, meaning that evidence gained as the result of an unlawful search or seizure cannot be used at the court trial of the person from whom it was seized. We've talked about anything that was seized illegally is called fruit of the poison tree, and it's inadmissible in a court. And if it's used, it can result in a mistrial. And so when we continue the Fourth Amendment here, we talked about probable cause. So when probable cause is exercised, it means the search is likely to uncover evidence concerning a crime. The search warrant must be specific and describe the place to be searched and what is being searched for. And we went through this in class together. The Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is the rights of persons accused of a crime, and so there's a lot of stuff here. So we can talk about criminal proceedings. We can talk about due process, double jeopardy, and eminent domain. Um, a person can be tried for a serious federal crime only if he or she has been indicted. To be indicted means that you have to be accused of that crime by a grand jury. The grand jury is a group of 25 people that are brought in together that are allowed to listen to an attorney, a prosecuting attorney, a state's attorney, a district attorney, present evidence to see whether or not a trial needs to take place, which means someone would have to be indicted. That 25 people, it doesn't have to be unanimous, it only has to be a simple majority. Um, In addition to the grand jury portion of the Fifth Amendment, no one may be subjected to double jeopardy. That is, tried twice for the same crime. And so we talked about this criminally in a criminal proceeding. If you're found to be not guilty or innocent, the government only has one chance to get it right. If they don't get it right, you can say, I did it, and there's nothing they can do about it. The difference being is if there's a civil trial brought against you, then you can be sued, but that's not the same thing as a criminal proceeding. Um, let's see here. As we continue with the Fifth Amendment, all persons are protected against self-incrimination, which means nobody can be legally compelled to answer any question in a government proceeding if that answer could lead to the person's prosecution. That's often called pleading the fifth. So it's the government's job to prove your guilt. They don't need you to do it against yourself. Now, some people, they don't understand their rights, may be led to uh, incriminating themselves, but they can't compel you to do so. Um, the Fifth Amendment's due process clause also prohibits unfair, arbitrary actions by the federal government. Um, like prohibition is set out against states in the 14th Amendment, but the government, you have the right to have certain guidelines to protect your personal rights, your due process. We talked about this whenever you go into the office. If you ever have to sign a referral, when you put your signature on there, it doesn't mean you agree to it. It just means that you received your due process. The last part of the Fifth Amendment is the government may take private property for legitimate public purposes. But when it exercises that power of eminent domain, it must pay a fair price for the property seized. People can challenge the government under eminent domain. It can be arbitrated by a court officer. But then if it does go to arbitration, then you have to agree. You could get more, you could get less, or you could get stuck with the same price. Okay, let's go to the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment it deals with criminal proceedings, but it's best known as the right to a fair and speedy trial. So a person accused of a crime has the right to be tried in court without undue delay and by an impartial jury. And so it's without undue delay would mean speedy. And it has to be fair. The jury must be sworn in, and they must swear to be objective as to provide a fair decision. The defendant must be informed of the charge upon which he or she will be tried. That means they also have the right to cross-examine witnesses or hostile witnesses, those that have accused him, and they have the right to require the testimony of favorable witnesses too. Meaning, excuse me, you have people that may be hostile towards you, but you can also call witnesses that could provide favorable testimony in your behalf. The defendant also has the right to be represented by an attorney at every stage of the criminal process. Now, the Supreme Court has had to come down with some decisions through the years, um, and that's why you are guaranteed an attorney even if you can't afford one. And I believe that was the Gideon versus Wainwright case. Oh, the accused has the right to be represented by a lawyer. There's that last bullet there I didn't pull up. All right, let's go to the Seventh Amendment. The Seventh Amendment is about civil suits, lawsuits. So this amendment applies only to civil cases heard in federal courts. And so if you're being sued, then you have the certain special rights. These are not criminal actions, though. These are civil actions. So a civil case does not involve any criminal matters. It is a dispute between private proper parties or between the government and a private party. So the right to a trial by jury is guaranteed in any civil case in a federal court if the amount of money involved in that case is $20 or more. Most cases today involve a larger sum, but I think this is one of the mistakes that the framers made, was that putting a dollar amount in there. It was, it's kind of ludicrous for it to be $20 in today's money. So you could basically sue a pizza place if they delivered the wrong deluxe extra large pizza to your house. Um, you may waive the right to a jury trial in this case and let a judge decide. And if now it, both juries, both sides have to agree to a bench trial, and that is a trial by a judge without a jury. Most of the time, when we see issues with the Seventh Amendment come up, they deal with contractual disputes, things of that sort. Um, so that's the Seventh Amendment. The Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment deals with excessive bail, unusual punishments, cruel and unusual punishments. And so let's just start with bail. Bail is the sum of money that a person accused of a crime may be required to post or to deposit with the court as a guarantee that he or she will appear in court at the proper time. The amount of bail required and or a fine that is imposed as punishment must be reasonable for the crime that was committed. It has to basically relate to the seriousness of the crime involved in the case. So this also provides a prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment, and it basically forbids any punishment judged to be too harsh, too severe for the crime for which it's imposed. Under the British system, things like drawing and quartering, being broken on the rack, certain forms of torture were common under the English system of laws. But with the Revolution and the period after the Revolution, wanting to break ties with British tradition, the Eighth Amendment comes in play here. Now, recently, we've seen an uptick in the idea that the death penalty is a violation of the Eighth Amendment. Colorado, just in the last couple of weeks, it's kind of been overshadowed with everything that's going on, has just completely eliminated the death penalty as a form of punishment within their state because they said it's a violation because it's cruel and unusual. The state shouldn't have the right to put someone to death. Now, we did this in the 1970s. Mostly because of issues involving the electric chair. But now it's come full circle again. And with modern techniques and providing death for punishments, we're seeing again that, perhaps with innocent people being put to death, maybe the death penalty isn't the best method for carrying out punishments. All right, so let's go to the Ninth Amendment, flying through these. So the Ninth Amendment is about powers reserved to the people. This is another one of those kitchen drawer kind of situations. So anything that's not mentioned in the previous 8 amendments or in the Constitution can fall here under the Ninth Amendment. So the fact that the Constitution sets out many civil rights guarantees and expressly provides for many protections against the government, it doesn't mean that there are no other rights that are also held by the people. So, we don't have an enumeration of all rights. Like you guys have the right to an education. We have the right to travel. We have the right to be married. Things along those lines. And so this amendment was included to make it clear that listed rights were not the only rights. This is a catch-all. It's kind of a safety net for us. And so it also, I think this last bullet point here is very important. It satisfied those who worried a Bill of Rights could be used to limit liberty and not protect it. And so it basically says, you know what? If the Constitution doesn't mention certain rights, you still hold on to those, and the Ninth Amendment guarantees that fact. And so then we can compare the Ninth Amendment to the 10th Amendment, which instead of powers reserved to the people, the 10th Amendment is about powers reserved to the states. So this amendment identifies the area of power that may be exercised by the states. All those powers the Constitution does not grant to the national government, and at the same time does not forbid to the states, belong to each of the states or the people of the states. And so it's just another way to firm up and stress that, hey, you know what? We're not limiting you. We've had powers that are given to the government, that are denied to the government at the federal level, that are denied to the state at the federal level or at the state level through the Constitution. So if we didn't cover it, you guys still maintain it. And then we go back to, like, that's why we have free and public education or driver's licenses or marriage licenses, things of those sorts. We have the rights to do those things because the Ninth and the 10th Amendments are the ones that provide us with that safety net. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here after the 10th Amendment. That's the Bill of Rights in a nutshell. I know I went through it pretty quick, but some of the stuff we'd covered in class is kind of a, this is just kind of a refresher. I hope you guys are doing well. I think I want to apologize for the crash course videos. I know he's a little annoying. I think he puts out good information, but sometimes it's just a little too flashy. I hope you guys can appreciate the fact that I didn't want to show my face during this presentation. I just want to make sure that you get the information, and then I'll try to have an assignment ready for you guys to go. Okay. Hey, I'm missing you guys, and I don't mean to be all wishy-washy about that stuff, but I'd much rather us be in the classroom. I'd much rather you guys be at school and be around each other, but we're kind of dealt this hand right now. So take care, and I'll have some other stuff coming your way soon. Looking forward to spring break coming up. Thanks, guys.